Alright, let's do this. So, any questions about anything so far? Anything we did? We're good? Okay. So, today we're going to talk about week 7. And week 7 is strings. So, you've been using strings all this time, so it's an unusual place to have strings, but hey, let's go over strings. So this is your summary from the book. Again, what is a string? String is anything that's enclosed in quotes. These here, by the way, what you're seeing here, these are not the plain text quotes. The plain text quotes are straight down. So if you actually copy and paste this stuff in your program, it's not going to work, because this is the quotes that you get if you type them in Word. The quotes that you'd get if you type them in Notepad or a plain text editor, they're going to look vertical down. Okay, so just don't copy paste stuff from here. So anything in quotes is a string. You can have any kind of numbers and symbols and spaces. It's a string. Creating a string. There's different ways to create a string, and these are examples from the book, right? So this one is string 1 Java, and you can create, basically strings are objects in Java. They're not a primitive data type, so it is basically a regular object. So just like you could create an object using a constructor like so, this is how you can make a string. Right, so this is the name of my string. This is the type. It's going to be a string, and then I use the new operator to create a new object and pass this value of the string into the constructor. Okay, and since strings are so commonly used, we can skip the constructor part and just do it this way. Okay, so if you want to create a string, as you have been doing, this is how you make a string. String constructors, right? There's a string constructor Java. Let me see where that is. String constructor. Let me download this thing. I throw it in Eclipse so we can see it. String constructor. All right. So these are just different constructors for strings. So other than the one that I just showed you, where you can just make a new string, you say string, some name is equal to, and then the string in quotes. These are some of the different constructors that you can use. This is your empty constructor for a string. This is one where you pass a string as an argument. You can create a character array. We haven't done arrays yet, but this is an array. You can create a character array and then use that to make a string. You can also use a character array to specify how to make a new string from parts of that, right? So in this particular case right here, I have this array, which is just a list of characters, and I'm telling it, make a string here. The name string 4 is going to be equal to a new string, which is going to be part of this character array, which starts at element 4 and goes to 3 down. All right, so this is your 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so you're telling it start at the D and then go 3 down. Okay, so this will make more sense when we get to the arrays, which is next week. You can also have a byte array create a string for you, same way. You can have the string buffer, which is another way to make a string. The string buffer was basically a way for you to split a string by spaces into words. So if I run this thing here, there's your different strings. Alright, so that's a string. And going back to this here, alright, so these are the different string constructors. That's part of the book. Concatenation, what happens when you have two strings and you put a plus sign in between the two of them is you end up with a bigger string, okay? One string that is equal to the two strings that you're trying to add combined, okay? So in this case, I have some kind of a string called message, which is equal to start, and then if I say message is equal to message plus ed, then that is going to make a new string called messaged, or no, started, okay? So that's your string concatenation. Even if you have two strings like, let's say for example, let me erase the buffer, string constructors. Alright, so let's say you have a string s1 is equal to 5, and then you have string s2, which is equal to, I don't know, 2. And if I do string s3 is equal to s1 plus s2, what happens? 5 plus 2? 52, right? So if you don't believe it, string system out print. And then I want to show s3 equals plus s3. Right, if I run this thing now, it shows a 52. Okay, so this is your example of string concatenation, right? So if you have two strings like 1, 2, then adding the two strings with a plus sign is just going to result in one bigger string. So this is your string concatenation. Okay, and if you wanted to convert a string into a number, you use the double dot parse double, right? If you remember that, double dot parse double s1, right? And then make sure that this thing is a number like 3.5, right? If you wanted to have a couple of these and you really want to add them, this is, let's say, double 1 equals this one plus the other one. Okay, and then if I wanted to show you this thing, do this num1, and this is something, again, this is you've done this already. Maybe you don't remember, but you've done this. So when I do this now, run this thing, right? That's actually does the math for you. Okay, so if you're adding two strings, that's a string concatenation. You have to convert them to numbers if you wanted to do some kind of a math. Okay, must convert strings to numbers if you want to do math. Okay, so that's string concatenation. The input, we did this in chapter 4. Right, there was a couple of different ways to do this. This one right here was with the import stream reader and the buffered reader, and this is the way to do an input of like a whole sentence separated by spaces. This is the way you want to do it. There's another way to do it, is with the dialog box. A little pop-up shows up. You enter the information in there, and that's even a little faster or a little shorter to write. There was also so those were the two main ones. There's also scanner, so you can use scanner to enter strings, but in my experience, if you do it with anything more than a single word, then you're going to have some issues. So use one of these if you want to enter a whole sentence. The string processing, let me see, string methods, download this thing here and throw that in Eclipse. Oops. Okay, so different methods to do things with strings. The most important thing is to mention that if you have some kind of an if, let's say you have string s1 is equal to 1, right? And then you have string s2 is equal to 2. I cannot do if S1 equals S2. Even though Java is not going to give you an error, even though it actually might work some of the times, this is not how you're supposed to compare strings. Okay, so if you try to do this, it'll work all the time, 60% of the time. Okay, so just don't do this for strings. The way you want to compare strings is you get one of the strings, S1 dot, and then if you notice, there's different ways to do this. All right, and then you can do equals ignore case, right? So I can do that equals, all right, ignore case, and then I can give another string, say the S2, right? And that's how you compare strings. So this is how you say if S1 is equal to S2. Okay, so this is how you should be doing string comparisons. What else? Yeah, and there's some examples in here. So there's a compare to also. All right, so the compare to returns. Let's see how it works. Yeah, this one doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it checks to see if one string is longer than the other, but that's not something that we're very interested in. So the main thing is this is how you compare strings. Okay, you can also use, instead of the plus right here, there's a method that allows you to concatenate one string with another string. Right, so the thing on the bottom is basically the same as saying string 1 is equal to string 1 plus their world. Right, so just different ways to do the same thing. Right, so this is your string concatenation. You can turn a string into all lowercase. Right, you can turn a string all to uppercase. There's other things that you can do with a string. You can check to see how long a string is. Say for example, for int I is equal to 0, I is less than s1 dot length, right? And then I plus plus, right? So then this thing here now, system out println, what I can do is I can show you s1 dot charAt I, right? So this is how you measure how many characters are in the string. So how many characters are in the first string? 3 characters, right? So this loop here is going to go from 0 to 1 less than 3. So 0, 1, 2. Those are going to be the values of the I. And then I'm going to plug in those values into my string. And the string, just like an array, which we haven't covered yet, has its own indexes. So this is the one, this is the 0, 1, 2, right? So this first letter has an index of 0, second letter has an index of 1, third letter has an index of 2. So if I go in there and I do system out println and I do s1 dot char at 0, what letter do I get? Oh, right? So that's how it works. Alright, so what is this thing going to do in the bottom when I do this thing with the loop?
It's going to show you the little characters that it
Shows every
index.
every character. Yeah.
0 and
Yeah. So I'm going to be plugging in the value of 0 instead of an I, then I'm going to plug in the value of 1 instead of the I, then I'm going to plug the value of 2 instead of the I. So instead of going in there and writing this stuff manually, I can have a loop that goes through the whole thing and shows you the characters. Okay, so you can use this to look through a string to see if certain letter appears in there. Okay, that's one application. So Java has, plenty of things that you can do with strings, unlike C++. It's not as user-friendly as Python as far as this kind of stuff, but you can do the same kind of things, very similar to Python, just with a little more typing. So that is that. So string processing, do not compare strings with the equal sign, even though I myself sometimes forget. If you wanted to convert a string from a string to a number, you use the double parse double if it's a double, or an int parse int if it's an int. There's also float parse float if it's a float. Okay, and then you can look at these tables, 7.5, 7.6 for some of these other ways. Instead of doing it this way, there's another way to do it, and that is this way right here. Okay, so just two different ways to do the same thing in Java. And the string buffer methods. Let's go look at that thing. String buffer methods. And again, this is another example of what's in the textbook. Let me copy it so we can look at it real quick. Okay, so string buffer is similar to a string, so you can create a new string buffer just like you could create a string. You can check the length of the string buffer just like you could with a string. But strings are immutable characters. Okay, so what that means is that I cannot, if I wanted to go and change one of these different characters of the string, let's say I just want to go and alter just this first one to 1, capital O. I can't. Okay, and the reason for that is because strings are immutable. What is it immutable? You cannot change the individual elements. Okay, so these are first element or the individual characters. Okay, so I cannot tell S1 go ahead and change your value at 0 to like uppercase. Oh. Okay, there's no way for me to do that. What I could do is I could get S1 and I can say, all right, well, S1 is equal to uppercase 1. That's possible. Okay, but what I'm doing is I'm not changing the individual character. I am simply assigning a whole new value to S1. Okay, if I was able to change the individual character, if there was a way for me to change the individual character, then the strings will be mutable. Okay, and they are immutable. Okay, but the string buffer isn't. Okay, so with the string buffer, you can actually go in there and you can replace individual characters from the string. So in here, we're replacing starting at 12 and going all the way to 18 with something else. Parts of the original string, we're replacing them using this. We can also insert into the string. There's ways for you to insert into it. You can reverse the string, so you can also split the string by little, spaces. So those are the different things that you can do with a string buffer that you cannot do with a regular string. Okay? Any questions? Nothing fancy, nothing overly complicated. And that's it. That's basically all there is as far as Chapter 7 is concerned. Not a very hard one, and like I said, it's kind of an unusual place to have to talk about strings, but hey, why not? Okay, so it's kind of like it's an introduction to arrays, if you will. So later on, and we saw some of these arrays in where is that? Not this one, right here. Right, so this was an array, and if you have done C++, it's the same thing, and if you've done Python, this is like a list. Okay, except the Python list can be of any type. You can have different data types. You can have like a string and a character and a float and whatever, different kinds of numbers in there. You can even have a list be inside of a list, something you can't do in C++. Java is just like C++. So arrays are going to be of the same type. They're fixed in size, right? You cannot change their length. If, let's say, for example, this array here is an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters, right? That's how long it is. I can't shorten it. I can change the individual things in it, right? The individual elements. And that is kind of what a string is also. Except the strings are immutable. Okay, so string methods. What else do I want to show you? So let's see. Let's say, for example, I have some kind of a string. Okay, let's have a method which is going to count public. I'm going to make it a static. Public static. Count letter. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a string, sentence, or word, let's call it, yeah, sentence, and then I'm going to have a character letter. Okay? What don't you like? Set method type. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is in here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a loop for int I is equal to 0, I is less than sentence length, right? I plus plus, and then in here, I'm going to have some kind of a variable int count equals 0, and then we're going to be looking to count how many times this letter appears in the sentence. So I go in there and I say if string sentence charAt. First of all, let's so this here is going to show me every character, and then I'm going to compare this character to my letter. Okay, since I'm comparing a character to a character, I can use the equal sign. Okay, and then every time I find one of those, I'm going to count it. Count plus plus. Okay, and since I only have one if inside of my for loop, and inside of the if I only have one count, I don't really need the curly brackets, so I'll get rid of those. Right, and then I'm going to return count. So that's it. That's my method. And what is this method going to do? Well, we're going to count some words or some letters. So let's say I'm going to have a string sent is equal to hello world. All right, and then in it, in there, I'm going to do system out println, and I'm going to tell you that the letter L appears plus, and then it's count letter sent, and then I'm sending over the character L and count. What did I type? Is undefined for the type string methods. What are you talking about? I just defined it. Set method to type to int. Oh, public static int. It's returning an integer. Okay? And if I run this thing, it's going to show me how many times the letter L appears in the sentence hello world, so it should show me the value 3. Okay? And there you go. Appears 3 times. So there's some things that you can do with a string 3 times. Okay, questions, comments, concerns?
What was the Eclipse that we had to download? It was the Java drop, or what was?
The Eclipse that I am using is Eclipse org. All right, so if I just Google Eclipse, all right, you're going to see Eclipse org. There's downloads, packages, click it, and I'm using this one, Eclipse IDE for Java developers.
No, EE you don't download because that's for enterprise.
Enterprise, yeah.
I mean, if you download it, would it still
It
work?
won't make a difference. Yeah, you can use that if too. The E, it will just have a whole bunch of things in it that you probably don't need. Yeah,
Is it?
yeah.
Oh, that's what they're gonna use it.
Right. Most likely.
So I don't know if I should just download it.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, if you want to download one or the other, that's fine. And there's other Eclipse out there for C and C++. There's one for PHP.
Go into the Java one for a second.
Which one?
Uh,
This one?
yeah.
Okay.
So they have all the different packages.
Yep. I just clicked this.
I down, you didn't, so that.
Oh no, wait, there's right here. So I just clicked whatever.
Yeah, but I think it takes the oxygen.
Yeah.
Package, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I downloaded the oxygen package, it was having issues, so then I went, just so you know,
Mhm.
I downloaded the Neon. Because it has more people selected the Neon, and then oxygen's kind of blue.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
for some reason it wasn't working.
Yeah, if any one of these packages doesn't work, yeah, you can always, you can try some of these other ones.
If you just want to write everything in Sublime still, is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's fine. But, you know, Sublime is not going to guide you through these things like as nicely as this is. All right, so for example, like see how I had, you know, I had a sentence here. I don't want to, I mean, I can go and look up the how to use the length of a sentence, but I don't have to because it's right there in Sublime. I do sentence dot, and then just lists everything that I can do with the string. There's all the different methods that are part of the string object. So yeah, that's the reason why I kind of like it, and it doesn't just list them. It also, you know, explains what they're doing and how to use them. Right. So this is for this method. This is for this method. So.
Are you ever going to use Eclipse for C++ classes or just?
Generally, my experience with Eclipse is that if you can get it to work, it's beautiful. But if it doesn't work, you're going to be like hitting the wall big time. I mean, just
Code blocks suck.
code blocks is no good for Mac. That's why I recommend C-Line
That's what I have.
for C++. But if this thing was any easier to set up and it worked easier than C-Line, if it was the setup was as easy for this as it was for C-Line, I would be totally using it. I like this. This is my favorite IDE. Eclipse is my favorite. I like it, especially for Java. Okay, for C++, I don't think it's as good as what you're seeing here, right? But it's still pretty good. I mean, it's one of the IDEs that's been around forever. But
It fixes your stuff.
it's kind of like writing your paper in a Word processor versus writing it in a notepad. You know, maybe you want to write it in a notepad. Maybe, you know, you don't want to have like the syntax highlighted and all those suggestions until you're actually done with writing it. Whatever, it's a matter of preference. Yeah. So that's all I have for strings. Any questions? What's up?
So we have the project at the end that's going to be the tic-tac-toe.
Yep.
Can you give us some ideas of how we can use strings to manipulate, or would strings play into that program?
Strings are going to play a bit of a. So the question was for the final project, the tic-tac-toe. Are we going to use strings? We are going to use strings because we're going to have like a little. We're going to have a window with 9 buttons, right, for the tic-tac-toe, and what you can use the string for, you're going to be using this kind of a thing, the S1 equals ignore case. What you can do is you can get you're going to have different buttons, and each button is going to either have some kind of a text in it or maybe some kind of a picture in it. So you can you can draw your own pictures and, you know, change the buttons to have pictures, or you can just have a text X and text O or whatever. But the way you're going to compare to see who wins and all that good stuff is you have to look at what's the value for each of these buttons. So if you have 3 X's in a row, you have to see if button 1 dot equals button 2 and button 2 dot equals button 3.
It's kind of like the rock, paper, scissors thing we did.
Yeah, kind of like the rock, paper, scissors thing that you did in the 45 and the Python thing. Yeah. So, but yeah, there will be some point where you're going to have to compare strings. Nothing too fancy though. Most of it is going to be it's a big piece of the puzzle, like comparing these values of the buttons. But
Well, it depends. What I was told is it depends on how you're going to do it. If you're going to do a computer to computer, it's more difficult.
Okay.
If you're going to do computer to human, a little less difficult,
Right.
but still difficult. Human to human is the easiest way.
right.
Or, I don't know.
Well, the default project, what I like what gets you an A is if you can get the tic-tac-toe, you can play it against yourself. So it's, you know, you pick player 1 and you pick player 2, and then just pick, you know, change turns and, you know, pick each player's, you know, turn, and then see who wins. So that if you do this following the, you know, program requirements, which were you got to use a 2D array, you got to make it a GUI, it has to be with dialog boxes and all that good stuff. You can't have one player choose, like you can't have an X and then change the X to an O. You can't have one player have 2 turns. So there's certain things that you have to watch out when you write the program. And if you do that, you get an A. Now, for extra challenge, what I recommend is the next step is now the next step for complicating this thing is have it so that it defend against you trying to beat it. All right, so that will be the next thing. It's like I pick a turn and then the computer tries to block me from winning. Then the next step after that is now have it try to beat you. All right, so you taught it how to defend, and the next step is teach it how to write the code so that it knows how to beat you now. And that'll be even more complicated. And if you want to have it even more complicated than that, then you can make it like an online multiplayer thing where you play against yourself but in the internet or whatever. You play against the computer and the internet. So those are the different things, and that the part where somebody can play against the computer and it defends and it blocks and it tries to win has been successfully done by 2 students during the close to 6 years that I've been teaching here. Okay, one of them was this guy who was like biochemical engineering from Purdue. He took a semester off to come over here and teach himself programming before he goes to medical school. And the other person was Marissa last semester, who killed it. She wrote the freaking thing in like less than 300 lines of code, and it works beautiful. So like if you can write this thing in less than 300 lines of code, I'll bow to you. So yeah, but it'll be good exercise, good mental gymnastics. I highly recommend it for some of you who if you want to push yourself and make it make it an AI. Roll definitely. Yeah. Start with the easiest one. Make sure it works. Yeah. Make sure you get the A, and then after that, yeah. And if you don't want to do a tic-tac-toe, if you want to do something else, that's fine too. Pick your own project. I'm happy with that.
Will you help us if we have?
I'll help you a little bit, but yeah. Depends. I mean, if you want to make like a card game or something, you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, card game.
I don't know much about card games. When I taught Java at MPC, I basically followed the content for the other instructor, and he had this like card game project in there. You choose different projects or whatever, right? And one of them was blackjack. I can't remember what it was. And I was kind of like, all right, I'm not going to even look at this thing because I don't know the rules of the game. I don't know how to play blackjack. I don't play cards. And then somebody at some point towards the end of the semester picked that project and asked me some questions about it. So I had to learn how to play blackjack so that I can write the freaking program so that I can answer the question. But if you want to do that, that's fine. There was like another one last semester. Somebody wanted to do what's that game that you play like the roulette, no, the craps or whatever. It's like I guess
More craps or something like that?
it was basically like you have to roll 7 and then 11 or something like that to win. There was like some weird rules, so I had to learn how to gamble to solve that problem. But anyway, pick your own project. Yeah, I'll be happy to help. I'm a nerd. I like to think about these things for fun. So, yeah, you also Android. If you want to make an Android project, you can do that too. Although we're not going to do a whole lot of Android in here. I'm just going to show you kind of how it works. But yeah, well, I had one student who did a Dungeons and Dragons in Android.
Oh, wow.
He didn't finish it, but he got it up to a point. Let's see if I have him. I gotta enable that. This is in Java projects. Wait. Oh, Java projects. Group can All right, public can read and execute. And this one, I think that might be enough. There you go. All right, so that was the Dungeons and Dragons. All right, nothing fancy. There was another guy who did Connect 4.
Oh, that's cool.
Right? And this one was really good.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, this guy entertained me big time because you know how I have assignments from the book? This guy didn't buy the book. And then every class, every project, every assignment for every chapter, he made up his own assignments. He was like, all right, I can see what you're trying to test here. You're trying to see if we know how to work with strings. Here's my project. And he makes something super complicated. I'm like, all right. And then he wouldn't even do all of them. He would do like one really complicated project for all the 5 assignments. And this was the last thing. He was like, all right, I see that you're trying to get me to read the book, but I won't. So here's my final project. This is the Sierpinski's triangle. And it's basically starts with one big triangle, right? And every time you click it, it splits itself into a smaller and smaller and smaller triangles. So yeah, that was his final project, and I just, I don't think he turned this in instead of the chapters like 9 and 10, and this was really complicated, right? So I just gave him an A, But yeah, he did, that was funny because he just basically was laughing and was like, I'm not gonna read this chapter. Here's something way more complicated than what you're asking. I think he was like some software developer somewhere who really knew what he was doing. Yeah, he was using ternary operators and all kinds of other things in there. So, anyone know what ternary operator is?
No.
It's like shortened ifs. It's like if you want to reduce an if to like a less code, you can use ternary operators. Yeah. Let me see if I can show you some examples. Java ternary operator. All right, that right there is a ternary operator. So it's basically you're checking to see if this is true, and if this is true, then you're going to get this value, and otherwise, if it's false, you use this value. So there was all kinds of stuff that he used in there that was similar to this kind of thing. So I was like, all right, you know what you're doing. I full credit. So yeah, that was the Sierpinski's triangle. So you can pick whatever you want if you want to. Yeah, do the tic-tac-toe. That would be the easiest thing. Okay, and there was another one, actually, an interesting story. I had a student, because I mentor the Gecko kids here, Gavilan Early College Academy. Like when they start doing their senior projects, one kid came over and he was like, "Yeah, I want to do a computer game." I'm like, what? Kid, just do tic-tac-toe. It'll be easier. He wanted to have a play like the 300, but on an Android. So there's a person that throws spears and blocks stuff with a shield and stuff. And I was like, okay, I don't think you're going to be able to do this. And he did. He taught himself object-oriented programming and all the physics you need to figure out how to calculate where the spear lands and all that stuff. Taught himself C# and Unity, and then ended up making an Android app. That was great. Yeah. Anyway, I don't have it, but I can find it somewhere. It should be in the projects.
At which point will we have the knowledge to be able to do tic-tac-toe? Like what week of?
Week 10. So when would you know enough to do tic-tac-toe? When you get to week 10. Yeah. Chapter 10 in the book teaches you everything you need to know, and then after that, yeah. At chapter 10, you can just focus on the final project. You don't have to do chapters 11 or 12, and you'll still get an A. But you can do them if you want. You don't have to not do them.
We have a lot of time to work on it.
Yeah. This is not a hard class. Yeah, compared to, I think 45 is more difficult than this.
Especially in the summer. This I need to.
Yeah, and he took it in the summer.
I'm like, oh, I do it.
No, okay. Yeah, so that's that. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. You know the drill.